"Don't turn around," someone whispered behind her. "Whatever you do, don't look." Claire Whitmore ignored the warning. The ballroom shimmered beneath towering crystal chandeliers, every polished glass reflecting a life that appeared flawless from a distance. A charity gala celebrating hope and generosity had drawn the city's most influential names, and cameras flashed every few seconds as reporters chased the perfect photograph. Claire had spent nearly an hour convincing herself to come. 8 months pregnant, tired, and carrying more questions than confidence. She believed one evening of smiling beside her husband might still rescue a marriage that had been quietly slipping away. Nathan Brooks was already standing near the center of the ballroom when she arrived. Perfectly tailored navy tuxedo. Confident smile. Every movement practiced. To investors, he was the millionaire who built an empire from nothing. To magazine covers, he was the face of modern success. To Claire, he had once been the man who stayed awake assembling a baby's crib before they even knew whether they were having a son or a daughter. Somewhere along the road between ambition and achievement, that man had disappeared. The orchestra shifted into a softer melody as another guest entered the room. Isabella Reed moved through the crowd with effortless confidence, greeting executives as though she belonged among them. Nathan noticed her immediately. His expression changed in a way Claire had not seen in months. His shoulders relaxed. His smile became genuine. It lasted only a second, but for Claire, it felt impossibly long. Around them, conversations continued without interruption. Waiters carried silver trays through clusters of donors. Television crews adjusted their lights near the stage. Charity banners promised brighter futures for families in need. Everything looked beautiful. Everything sounded hopeful. Yet Claire couldn't ignore the quiet feeling that she had arrived too late to a story everyone else already understood. She rested one hand gently against her baby as a tiny kick reminded her she wasn't facing the evening alone. "Just a little longer," she whispered beneath her breath. Nathan crossed the marble floor toward Isabella. They exchanged a few quiet words that disappeared beneath the music. Then a photographer called their names. Instinctively, Nathan stepped closer and wrapped one arm around Isabella's shoulders. Camera flashes erupted like summer lightning. Applause echoed from another corner of the ballroom where an award presentation had just begun. For a brief moment, no one seemed to notice Claire, standing only a few yards away. She tried to take another step, but the room suddenly felt strangely distant. The lights blurred. The polished floor seemed to shift beneath her feet. A woman nearby reached toward her with concern, asking if she was all right, yet the words sounded muffled, as though spoken from underwater. Claire lifted her eyes one final time. Nathan never looked in her direction. His attention remained fixed on the smiling cameras surrounding him. The contrast struck her harder than any argument they had ever shared. It wasn't anger that filled the silence. It was absence. Then her vision faded completely. Gasps rippled through the ballroom as guests rushed forward. Crystal glasses stopped clinking. Conversations dissolved into confusion. Somewhere beyond the growing crowd, Nathan finally turned his head. But by then, paramedics were already kneeling beside Claire, shielding her from the cameras that had only moments earlier been celebrating another perfect evening. Long after the ballroom emptied, one photograph continued spreading across phones and computer screens across the city. It showed a millionaire smiling beside another woman while his pregnant wife disappeared into the arms of strangers. No one knew that image would become the first page of a story powerful enough to bring down everything Nathan Brooks had spent a lifetime building. Claire opened her eyes to a ceiling she had never seen before. White panels, soft fluorescent light, the faint rhythm of a heart monitor quietly measuring every second she had survived. For a brief moment, she could not remember why her body felt so heavy. Then fragments returned like broken pieces of glass. The ballroom, the cameras, Nathan's arm around Isabella, the floor rushing toward her. She instinctively placed one trembling hand across her stomach. A nurse noticed the movement immediately and stepped closer with a reassuring smile. "Your baby is stable," she said gently. "Both of you are going to be all right." Relief washed across Claire's face, but it lasted only a heartbeat. Her eyes drifted toward the empty chair beside the hospital bed. No flowers. No jacket folded over the armrest. No husband waiting through the night. The silence answered the question she had not yet spoken. Nathan had never come. Outside the room, Morning sunlight spilled across the hallway while doctors exchanged quiet conversations before beginning another ordinary day. Inside, nothing about Claire's life felt ordinary anymore. She closed her eyes again, replaying the final image she remembered before everything went dark. Nathan smiling for photographers while she struggled to stay on her feet. The memory hurt far more than the fall itself. A gentle knock interrupted the silence. An older woman stepped into the room carrying a small paper gift bag. Claire recognized her after a moment. Eleanor Pierce, one of the senior volunteers who had coordinated charity events with the foundation for years. They had spoken only a few times, yet Eleanor's expression carried genuine concern. "I'm sorry to arrive unannounced," she said quietly, "but there was something I couldn't leave behind." She placed the bag on the bedside table. Inside rested Claire's wedding ring, her phone, and a folded ivory handkerchief embroidered with tiny blue flowers. Claire frowned. "That's not mine." Eleanor nodded. "Someone slipped it into your belongings before the paramedics left the ballroom." Carefully unfolding the handkerchief, Claire discovered 4 words written in elegant blue ink. You weren't imagining it. No signature. No explanation. Only those 4 words. A chill passed through the room despite the warm sunlight outside. Eleanor lowered her voice. There were people at the gala who saw more than the newspapers reported. Not everyone agreed with what happened. Before Claire could ask another question, the television mounted on the opposite wall switched automatically to a morning news program. The screen filled with images from the gala. Reporters praised the success of the charity fundraiser while carefully describing Claire's collapse as an unexpected medical emergency caused by exhaustion. Nathan appeared briefly during an interview, offering a calm statement that he was grateful his wife was recovering and asking the public to respect their family's privacy. His voice sounded composed, practiced, almost flawless. Claire watched without expression until the interview ended. Then she quietly reached for the remote and turned the television off. "He already knows how he wants the story to be remembered," she whispered. Eleanor met her eyes for a long moment before speaking. "Then perhaps someone else should remember what actually happened." As Eleanor prepared to leave, she paused beside the door. "There's a young woman who has been asking whether you're awake. She worked at the gala. She says she witnessed something important, but she's frightened. I told her I would wait until you were ready." Claire looked once more at the folded handkerchief resting beside her wedding ring. For simple words. No accusation. No proof. Yet they carried more weight than every polished statement already appearing across television screens. For the first time since waking, she realized the gala had not ended when she lost consciousness. It had only begun revealing the truth. The young woman hesitated outside the hospital room for nearly a full minute before finding the courage to knock. Claire looked up from the folded handkerchief resting on her lap as the door slowly opened. A woman in her early 20s stepped inside, still wearing the simple navy cardigan issued to the catering staff at the charity gala. Her name tag had been removed, but the nervous way she held her hands together revealed she was carrying more than anxiety. "My name is Emily Foster," she said quietly. "I serve drinks at the gala." Claire gestured toward the empty chair beside the bed. "Please sit down." Emily remained standing. "I'm afraid if I sit, I won't have the courage to tell you why I came." The room fell silent except for the soft beeping of the monitor. Eleanor gave Claire an encouraging glance before quietly leaving, closing the door behind her. Emily took a slow breath. "I saw what happened before you collapsed." Claire's heartbeat quickened. "Everyone saw it." Emily shook her head. "No. They saw the hug. I saw everything before that." Claire listened without interrupting. Emily explained that she had been assigned to serve drinks near the private reception lounge behind the ballroom. While waiting for new instructions, she noticed Nathan and Isabella speaking with unusual intensity. They were alone, believing no guests had wandered into that section of the venue. Emily had no intention of listening, but Nathan's raised voice drew her attention. He wasn't shouting, she clarified. He was speaking very firmly, like someone trying to control a situation. Claire swallowed. "What did you hear?" Emily searched her memory carefully. "Only pieces. He kept saying the timing had to be perfect. Isabella asked if you were coming. He answered, she has to see it herself. Otherwise, she'll never believe it's over." Claire felt the air leave her lungs. Emily continued before fear could silence her again. "I don't know what he meant. Maybe it was nothing. But after I saw what happened in the ballroom, I couldn't stop thinking about those words." Claire lowered her eyes to the blanket covering her knees. Nathan had not acted surprised when cameras captured him embracing Isabella. Looking back now, his movements had seemed almost rehearsed. Emily carefully reached into her handbag and removed a small envelope. I found this after everyone rushed toward you. Inside lay a security access card bearing the logo of Brooks Development Group. It had been dropped near the entrance to the private lounge. Across the back, someone had written a meeting time in black ink, 8:15 p.m. The gala had officially begun at 8. Claire examined the card without touching the writing. Is this Nathan's? Emily shook her head. I don't know, but I remembered seeing him holding it before the speeches started. Claire stared at the card while countless questions raced through her mind. If Nathan had arranged a private meeting before the gala, who else had attended? Why had he insisted she witness the embrace? Was it meant to humiliate her? Or distract everyone from something else entirely? Emily's voice trembled again. I've been thinking about quitting my job. People like Mr. Brooks have powerful friends. I don't want trouble. Claire finally looked up and offered the first genuine smile she had managed since waking. You're not here because you wanted trouble. Emily nodded. No. Claire folded the access card back into the envelope. You're here because you didn't want to live with silence. Emily's eyes filled with relief. Before leaving, she paused at the doorway. One more thing. Claire waited. There was another person near the lounge that night. An older man wearing a gray suit. He wasn't a guest. He watched everything. And after you were taken away, he picked up a folder someone had dropped before walking out through the staff entrance. The door closed softly behind her. Claire sat motionless, holding the envelope in one hand and the embroidered handkerchief in the other. Two strangers had already risked their peace to bring her fragments of the truth. Whatever had begun beneath the glittering lights of the gala was no longer a broken marriage alone. It was becoming a carefully constructed story, and somewhere beyond the hospital walls, someone was still trying to keep its final chapter hidden. Claire was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, but she did not return to the mansion she had once called home. Instead, Eleanor drove her to a quiet lakeside guest house owned by an old family friend, a place hidden from reporters and curious neighbors. For the first time in weeks, there were no cameras waiting outside. Only the gentle sound of water brushing against the shore and the steady rhythm of birds greeting the morning. Claire stood on the wooden porch, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. She had spent years believing peace came from avoiding conflict. Now she understood that peace could also come from refusing to ignore the truth. By noon, another visitor arrived. Michael Harper stepped out of a silver sedan, carrying nothing more than a leather notebook and a slim briefcase. He had been Claire's father's attorney years earlier before retiring from corporate litigation. Calm, observant, and careful with every word, he greeted Claire with quiet respect rather than sympathy. Eleanor told me only the basics, he said after they sat inside. Before I agree to help, I need to know one thing. Are you looking for revenge? Claire answered without hesitation. No. Michael nodded once. Good. Revenge is emotional. Truth survives in court. Claire placed the embroidered handkerchief, the security access card, and a written summary of Emily's statement on the table between them. Michael examined each item slowly, making notes without drawing conclusions too quickly. Individually, he said, none of these prove wrongdoing. Together, they suggest planning. Planning leaves records. Claire leaned forward. Where do we begin? Michael opened his notebook. People who plan carefully usually forget one thing. Every plan creates a trail. Calendar entries, visitor logs, security records, digital timestamps, financial approvals. Someone always documents something. That afternoon, Michael contacted a licensed corporate investigator named David Collins, a former compliance officer who specialized in reconstructing internal timelines. David agreed to review only publicly obtainable records and information that witnesses voluntarily provided. If someone intended to create a public spectacle, David explained during a video call, they probably coordinated more than one person. Coordination creates patterns. Meanwhile, Nathan Brooks appeared on another television interview. Seated comfortably in an expensive studio, he spoke about family privacy, charitable responsibility, and false speculation spreading across social media. His voice remained composed, but one sentence caught Claire's attention. The events of that evening were entirely unexpected. Michael quietly muted the television. That statement may become important. Claire looked at him. Because of what Emily heard? He nodded. Exactly. If witnesses eventually establish that certain moments were planned, unexpected becomes a dangerous word. Late that evening, David called back with the first meaningful discovery. The private reception lounge at the hotel required electronic access. Every entry was automatically recorded by the building's security system. He could not obtain the records without authorization, but he confirmed that such logs existed and were routinely preserved for several months. Claire remembered the access card Emily had found near the lounge entrance. Suddenly, it no longer seemed like an ordinary piece of plastic. It was a key to a timeline someone might have forgotten existed. As the conversation ended, another unexpected message appeared on Claire's phone from an unknown number. There was no greeting, no signature, only a photograph. It showed a leather portfolio lying open on a conference table. Inside was a printed seating chart for the charity gala. 3 names had been circled in red ink: Nathan Brooks, Isabella Reed, Claire Whitmore. Beneath the photograph appeared a single sentence: some seats were chosen for a reason. Claire stared at the image while silence settled over the room once again. Every answer seemed to uncover 2 new questions. But unlike the frightened woman who had awakened alone in a hospital bed only days earlier, she no longer felt powerless. Somewhere, someone had begun risking everything to expose the truth. And for the first time since the gala, Claire realized she was no longer searching alone. The anonymous photograph remained on Claire's phone long after midnight. 3 names circled in red. 3 seats deliberately arranged. It no longer looked like coincidence. It looked like choreography. The following morning, David Collins arrived at the guest house carrying a folder much thicker than the slim notebook he had brought only 2 days earlier. He placed it carefully on the dining table before speaking. I still don't have the hotel's electronic access logs, he said. But I found something else. Claire and Michael exchanged a glance as David removed several printed pages. They were public event schedules, vendor contracts, and floor plans submitted weeks before the charity gala. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then David pointed to one line highlighted in yellow. The seating chart was revised 3 separate times during the 48 hours before the event. Claire frowned. People change seating all the time. Yes, David replied calmly. But these revisions weren't requested by the event coordinator. They were approved directly through Brooks' development group. Michael leaned forward, meaning Nathan's office became involved in details they normally wouldn't manage. David nodded. Exactly. Claire stared at the highlighted page. Nathan had always insisted he was too busy to discuss decorations, guest lists, or table assignments. Yet somehow, someone from his executive office had personally authorized changes affecting only one section of the ballroom. The same section where photographers had been instructed to gather before the award ceremony. Michael quietly tapped the photograph on Claire's phone. Whoever sent this wanted us to notice the seating. Before anyone could respond, Claire's phone vibrated again. Another anonymous message appeared. This time there was no image, only an address and a time. Storage Unit 214. Today, 3 p.m. Michael immediately shook his head. It could be a trap. Claire agreed, but something about the messages felt different. Whoever was contacting her had never demanded money, never threatened her, and never asked her to trust them blindly. They simply kept leaving pieces of a puzzle. By mid-afternoon, David visited the storage facility while Michael remained nearby in another vehicle. Unit 214 had been legally rented under a business services company that had recently dissolved. After obtaining permission from the facility manager, David discovered that the rental contract had expired the previous week. Inside the nearly empty unit sat only one sealed archive box. No valuables, no electronics, just paperwork. When David returned, he carefully opened the box on the dining table. Most folders contained routine planning documents from previous charity events. Then, near the bottom, Michael found a thin envelope labeled Media Coordination. Inside were email printouts discussing camera placement, interview timing, and guest arrivals. None mentioned Claire directly, but one final page caught everyone's attention. It listed the names of photographers expected to capture priority moments throughout the evening. Beside one entry appeared a handwritten note. Keep center aisle clear between 8:25 and 8:30. Claire remembered collapsing only moments after that time. Michael read the note twice before closing the folder. This still doesn't prove intent, he said, but it proves planning. Claire looked out through the window where the late afternoon sun reflected across the lake. She was beginning to understand something she had missed for years. Nathan's greatest strength had never been money. It had been preparation. Every meeting, every interview, every public appearance had been arranged to perfection. If his image had been carefully managed for years, then perhaps the gala had been managed too. As evening settled over the quiet shoreline, another unexpected development arrived. Emily Foster called with trembling excitement. "I remembered the older man in the gray suit," she said. "I know where I've seen him before." Claire stood immediately. "Who is he?" Emily hesitated only a second. "He wasn't hotel staff. He attended one of Brooks Development Group's executive conferences 6 months ago. I served coffee there too." Silence filled the room. The mysterious witness had just become something far more significant. He wasn't an accidental observer. He had been connected to Nathan's corporate world long before the gala ever began. Somewhere, a man carrying a forgotten folder still possessed answers that could change everything. 3 days passed without another anonymous message. The silence unsettled Claire more than the steady flow of clues ever had. Whoever had been guiding them through fragments of the truth had suddenly disappeared. Michael advised patience. David continued reconstructing timelines from public records. Emily returned to work, pretending nothing unusual had happened. Yet beneath the calm surface, every one of them sensed that something had changed. Late on Friday afternoon, David finally called. His voice was lower than usual. "I found the man in the gray suit." Claire straightened in her chair before he continued. "His name is Richard Hale. He worked for Brooks Development Group for nearly 20 years as Director of Internal Compliance." Michael immediately recognized the title. "Compliance officers don't organize galas," he said. "They investigate companies from the inside." David nodded. "Exactly. Richard resigned 8 months ago, officially for health reasons." Claire remembered Emily's words. She had seen him months before at an executive conference. "Can we speak with him?" David hesitated. "I already tried." A long silence followed. "He refused?" Claire asked. "No," David answered quietly. He agreed. The meeting was arranged for the following evening at a small public library outside the city where Richard volunteered after retirement. The building closed early, leaving only a reading room overlooking a quiet garden. Richard Hale looked older than Claire expected. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his posture remained straight despite the years. He greeted everyone politely before placing a worn leather folder on the table. "I know why you're here," he said. "I've been expecting this day." Claire did not interrupt. Richard looked directly at her with genuine regret. "I'm sorry for what happened to you." Those simple words carried more weight than every carefully rehearsed statement Nathan had delivered on television. Richard slowly opened the folder. Inside were handwritten meeting notes, internal memorandums, and copies of executive policy discussions. None accused Nathan of a crime. None mentioned the gala by name. But together they revealed something more revealing. Nathan had built a corporate culture obsessed with controlling public perception above all else. He believed reputation was an asset, Richard explained. Every difficult situation became a communications problem before it became a human one. Michael examined one memorandum describing crisis response procedures. "These are ordinary corporate policies," he observed. Richard nodded. "By themselves, yes." He removed one final page from the folder. Unlike the others, it was unsigned. Across the top, someone had written a single sentence in black ink. "Visibility determines reality." Richard looked toward Claire. Nathan repeated those words in executive meetings more than once. Claire lowered her eyes. Suddenly, the gala looked different in her memory. The photographers, the carefully arranged seating, the perfect timing. Everything had revolved around visibility. Richard continued carefully. "I don't know whether anyone planned what happened to you that night. I cannot say that honestly. But I can tell you this." He paused. Nathan never left important public moments to chance. The room remained silent. No dramatic revelation. No hidden recording. Only the quiet testimony of a man who had spent decades watching how power operated behind polished conference room doors. As they prepared to leave, Richard handed Claire a business card with another name written on the back. "If anyone still has the original planning records from the gala," he said softly, "it would be Olivia Bennett." Claire frowned. "Who is she?" "Nathan's former executive assistant. She resigned shortly after I did." Michael slipped the card into his notebook. "Do you think she'll help?" Richard looked through the library window toward the fading evening light. People stay silent for many reasons, he answered. Fear is only one of them. Sometimes they remain silent because they hope someone else will finally ask the right question. Walking back toward the parking lot, Claire felt the investigation shifting once again. Until now, every clue had explained how carefully Nathan controlled appearances. The next person on their path might finally explain why. And somewhere beyond the quiet streets, Nathan Brooks still believed he was protecting his future, unaware that the people who had once protected his secrets were slowly beginning to choose the truth instead. Monday morning arrived with an uneasy calm that seemed almost unnatural. Claire had learned that the quietest days often carried the greatest changes. She was sitting on the guest house porch when Michael's phone rang. He listened without interrupting, thanked the caller, and slowly lowered the device. The board of Brooks Development Group has scheduled an emergency governance meeting for Wednesday, he said. Claire looked up. Because of us. Michael shook his head. Because questions have started reaching investors. David placed a folder on the table. Public pressure didn't create this. Uncertainty did. Over the weekend, several financial publications had reported unusual executive oversight concerns inside the company. No accusations had been published, but the rumors were spreading faster than official statements could contain them. Nathan, meanwhile, continued presenting the image of complete confidence. He appeared at a business luncheon, smiling for photographers and assuring reporters that the company remained stronger than ever. Claire watched only a few seconds of the interview before switching off the television. He still believes appearances can solve everything, she said quietly. Michael looked toward the lake. Sometimes they do, until the people closest to the truth stop protecting them. That afternoon, Olivia Bennett finally agreed to meet. She chose a small botanical garden on the outskirts of the city, explaining over the phone that she no longer trusted conference rooms or private offices. Claire immediately understood why. Olivia arrived carrying no briefcase, only a worn canvas tote and years of visible exhaustion. She greeted Claire politely before taking a slow breath. I've asked myself for months whether I should stay silent, she admitted. Every day the answer became harder. Claire didn't pressure her. She simply waited. Olivia smiled faintly. That's one reason I agreed to come. You came here looking for answers, not revenge. They walked slowly through the garden while autumn flowers swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. Olivia explained that during her final year as Nathan's executive assistant, his priorities had changed dramatically. Every public appearance became a carefully engineered production. Seating charts, camera positions, press timing. Even charitable events were reviewed through the lens of reputation management. He believed every room had an ideal angle, she said. Not for the guests, for the photographs. Claire remained silent, remembering the circled seating chart they had received days earlier. Olivia stopped beside a quiet fountain before opening her tote bag. She removed a slim leather planner filled with handwritten notes. These are my personal appointment records, she explained. I kept them because I never completely trusted the official calendar. Michael carefully examined several pages. One date immediately stood out. The afternoon before the charity gala, Nathan had scheduled a private planning session titled Media Review. Official company calendars had described the same hour as a routine executive budget meeting. Different titles, Michael observed. Olivia nodded. That happened more often than people realized. David compared the planner with publicly available schedules. The discrepancy was genuine, small on its own, but impossible to ignore when added to everything else. Claire gently closed the planner. Why keep this? Olivia looked across the fountain, her voice almost lost beneath the sound of flowing water. Because I hoped I'd never need it. And because I knew someday someone honest might. As the meeting ended, Olivia offered one final warning. Nathan isn't dangerous because he loses his temper, she said. He's dangerous because he always believes he can stay one step ahead. Driving back toward the guest house, Claire stared through the passenger window at the fading sunlight. The investigation had changed again. They no longer relied on anonymous messages or forgotten clues alone. They had something stronger now. People willing to attach their own names to the truth. 2 days later, as the emergency board meeting approached, Nathan Brooks still believed he was preparing to defend his reputation. He did not yet realize that the story surrounding him had quietly stopped belonging to him. It now belonged to every person who had finally decided that silence was no longer worth the cost. Wednesday arrived beneath a gray sky that matched the mood hanging over Brooks Development Group headquarters. News vans lined the street before sunrise, their satellite dishes pointed toward the towering glass building where the emergency board meeting would begin within the hour. Reporters spoke in measured tones, careful not to speculate beyond the facts they could verify. Investors, employees, and curious onlookers gathered behind security barriers, all asking the same silent question. What was happening inside the company that no one had expected only a week earlier? Claire did not stand among the crowd. She watched the live coverage from Michael's office across town, where legal documents covered nearly every surface of the conference table. David sat beside a laptop, quietly monitoring financial news. Emily and Eleanor had also joined them, not because they intended to participate, but because each had become part of a journey none of them had imagined when the gala first unfolded. Shortly after 9 o'clock, Michael's phone rang. He listened for nearly 5 minutes without speaking. When the call ended, he looked toward Claire. The board has opened an independent governance review. Claire nodded slowly. What does that mean? It means they are no longer relying only on Nathan's explanation. Across the television screen, Nathan entered the headquarters surrounded by advisors. His expression remained composed, but the confidence that had once seemed effortless now appeared carefully maintained. He answered no questions before disappearing inside the building. Hours passed. Outside, commentators filled the silence with discussions about corporate responsibility, executive ethics, and investor confidence. Inside the boardroom, no cameras were allowed. Only directors, legal counsel, and independent advisors remained behind closed doors. Shortly after noon, Olivia Bennett received a phone call of her own. She listened quietly before turning to Michael. They've requested copies of my appointment records. Michael asked only one question. Will you provide them? Olivia met Claire's eyes before answering. Yes. There was no anger in her voice, only certainty. One witness after another had reached the same conclusion. The truth no longer belonged in private notebooks. By early afternoon, another development shifted the atmosphere completely. Richard Hale informed Michael that the independent reviewers had also requested interviews with former compliance personnel. They're asking broader questions than I expected, Richard said. Not just about the gala, about decision-making practices over several years. Claire remained silent. She had entered this journey searching for answers about one painful evening. Now the consequences stretched far beyond a single event. David refreshed the financial news feed. Brooks Development Group stock had begun falling as uncertainty spread through the market. No findings had been announced. No accusations had been confirmed. Yet confidence, once shaken, was proving difficult to restore. Late in the afternoon, the board meeting finally concluded. Directors left the building without making detailed statements. One brief announcement followed. The company confirmed that an independent review would continue and that Nathan Brooks had voluntarily stepped aside from his executive responsibilities pending its completion. The wording was careful, professional, measured, but everyone understood what it meant. Nathan's authority had been interrupted by the very institution he had spent years leading. Claire switched off the television and walked toward the office window overlooking the quiet city below. She expected satisfaction. Instead, she felt something entirely different. Relief. Not because Nathan had suffered, but because the burden of carrying unanswered questions alone had finally begun to lift. Michael joined her near the window. This isn't the end, he reminded her gently. Claire nodded. I know. The investigation may take months. Then it takes months. She rested one hand over her unborn child as evening light slowly broke through the clouds. I waited this long to learn the truth. I can wait a little longer. As the others quietly gathered their papers, Claire's phone vibrated once again. Another anonymous message had arrived. This time there were no photographs, no cryptic clues, only one sentence. Tomorrow, the person who started all of this is finally ready to speak. Claire stared at the screen without blinking. Every witness until now had revealed pieces of the puzzle from the outside. Tomorrow promised something entirely different. Someone from the very center of the story was about to step forward, and whatever remained hidden after the gala would no longer have anywhere left to hide. The following morning began without reporters, without flashing cameras, and without carefully prepared speeches. It began in a quiet conference room inside the offices of the Independent Review Committee, where every person present had agreed to one condition before entering. Only verified facts would matter. Claire arrived with Michael shortly before 10 o'clock. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, her pregnancy now impossible to hide, yet it was neither sympathy nor attention she sought. She wanted closure. Across the room, Nathan Brooks entered several minutes later accompanied by legal counsel. For the first time since the gala, he looked directly at Claire. Neither smiled. Neither spoke. Between them stood months of silence that no greeting could erase. The committee chair welcomed everyone before explaining the process. Witnesses would be heard individually. Documents would be reviewed in chronological order. No conclusions had been reached in advance. The first testimony came from Richard Hale, who calmly described the company's long-standing emphasis on managing public image. He avoided exaggeration, limiting every statement to facts he had personally observed during his years of service. Next came Olivia Bennett. She presented her handwritten appointment planner alongside corresponding calendar discrepancies that had already been independently verified. Her voice never rose. She answered every question carefully, even when cross-examined. Emily Foster followed. Nervous but determined, she repeated exactly what she had witnessed near the private reception lounge on the evening of the gala. She admitted openly what she did not know and remained equally clear about what she did remember. Hours passed. Every testimony added another piece to the same picture. Not a conspiracy, not a sensational secret. Instead, they revealed a pattern of carefully orchestrated public appearances and deliberate reputation management that extended well beyond one charity event. Finally, Nathan was invited to respond. He stood slowly before the committee. For several moments, the room remained completely silent. Then he spoke in a voice far quieter than the confident executive the public had always known. "I spent years believing success meant controlling every outcome," he began. "Every interview, every photograph, every public moment." He paused before continuing. "Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking how those decisions affected the people closest to me." Claire watched without interruption. Nathan did not deny approving media arrangements. He did not deny directing executive staff to prioritize public perception. He admitted that he had become so consumed by protecting his reputation that he failed to recognize the human cost of his choices. He never claimed to have intended Claire's collapse, and no evidence established that he had. But neither could he deny that his actions had created the circumstances that left her standing alone when she needed him most. Late that afternoon, the committee concluded its review. Its written findings criticized serious failures in executive judgment, governance, and ethical leadership. The board formally accepted Nathan's resignation as chief executive officer and announced sweeping governance reforms across the company. Outside the building, reporters rushed to summarize the decision. Headlines focused on corporate consequences, stock prices, leadership changes, public accountability. Claire barely noticed any of them. She walked slowly toward the parking area overlooking a small public garden where children laughed beneath the afternoon sun. Michael approached quietly. "It's over," he said. Claire looked down at the tiny pair of baby shoes she had carried in her handbag throughout the entire investigation. They had become her reminder that every decision she made belonged not only to her past, but also to her child's future. She smiled gently. "No," she answered. "This is where something better begins." Months later, after welcoming a healthy baby into the world, Claire returned once more to the lakeside guest house where her journey had truly changed direction. The water remained as peaceful as ever. The fear she once carried was gone. She finally understood that justice had not arrived through anger, revenge, or public humiliation. It had arrived because ordinary people chose honesty over silence, one decision at a time. Far across the city, Nathan began rebuilding a life far removed from boardrooms and headlines, learning too late that wealth could protect a reputation for a while, but never a neglected conscience. And the photograph that had once captured a millionaire embracing another woman while his pregnant wife collapsed became remembered for an entirely different reason. It reminded everyone who saw it that a single moment can change a life forever, but character determines what survives after the cameras stop flashing.